I am super honored and grateful that you all came here tonight. This event is, I think, it's the perfect way to kick off our public programming here in partnership with the Mural Arts Philadelphia. I want to give a shout out to Kathy Harris, the amazing program coordinator, and the entire staff at Mural Arts. I also want to thank our PAFA staff and all the visitors experience associates, CJ Stahl, who helped install the wonderful mural and the great pop-up photography exhibition by Lamont. My goodness, that was an incredible gift. Thank you. And I guess I'm just going to introduce Jane quickly, because we could talk about Jane for a long time. Jane Golden has been the driving force of Mural Arts Philadelphia since its inception, overseeing its growth from a small city agency into the nation's largest public art program and a global model for transforming public space and community through art. Under Golden's direction, Mural Arts has created over 4,000 works of public art through innovative collaborations with community-based organizations, city agencies, nonprofit organizations, schools, the private sector, and philanthropies. Under Golden's direction, Mural Arts has developed groundbreaking programs that transform practice and policies related to youth education, restorative justice, environmental issues, and behavioral health. Golden has overseen a series of increasingly complex, ambitious, and award-winning public art projects and launched the knowledge-sharing Mural Arts Institute in 2017 to help guide best practices across the globe. I know we all know Jane's work, and I'm going to stop there, but I just want to welcome Jane and thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you and Nina and everyone at PAFA and AMP. This is really an extraordinary exhibition, breathtaking, and we just feel truly honored to play a small role. So I want to thank everyone. I know everybody's busy, so thank you so much for making time to come out tonight. It's a special evening, and our esteemed panelists, multidisciplinary artist Theodore Harris. We're going to have a panel with Theodore Harris, anonymous art collective Ms. Icar, I'm a huge fan, as I was saying before, and poet Lamont Steptoe, who I'm so excited to see. They will examine how the public art landscape has changed over time. Each artist on this multi-generational panel brings a unique perspective to their work as public artists. They will share their experience and vision for public art and mural making and careful consideration of the impacts of voter suppression, mass incarceration, and white supremacy. As part of this project, Mural Arts and the Guild, which is our reentry program, collaborated with Theodore Harris, to create a portable mural based on his amazing collage that he did in 1995 called Vetoed Dreams, which was well ahead of its time. And it is in the collection here at PAFA and part of the Rising Sun exhibition, which means I'm like triply, quadruply proud of Theodore Harris. So I just want to say that I met Theodore like a long time ago, back in the day. It would date us, so so it was the Anti-Graffiti Network. And Theodore was probably one of the first, maybe the first graffiti writer that I met and worked with. And we worked together for 10 years. And, one of the privileges of the Anti-Graffiti Network, and people always go, oh, Anti-Graffiti, it was like really an oppressive organization. Actually, it was like a youth development program more than anything. But we had this little arts core. We didn't really have a name. We didn't have a desk. It was odd, right? They gave us an undercover police car. When you beeped the horn, the trunk flew open. We had bad paint. It was beige, big brushes. Like everything went wrong for us, like all the time. But we had a bond. And our bond was our mutual love of art. And we had this belief, deep-seated belief, that art could make a difference. And over the years, I've had this privilege of watching Theodore grow and thrive and create and make a mark on this world in a really profound way. And so it's just delightful to be here tonight to celebrate you and your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Alexander, who's an incredible poet and the head of the Mellon Foundation, says, "None of us shall live forever, but art and knowledge and wisdom can. Art and history are the indelibles. They outlive flesh. They offer us a compass or a lantern with which to move through the wilderness and allow us to imagine something different and better." I think another gift of this job is that we try really hard to center artists because we see them as extraordinary agents of transformation and change. They speak truth to power. They pull the curtain back. They show us what the world can be. They give us hope. There are over 4,000 works of public art in the city, and they range from the political to the poetic. Everyone is a snapshot of citizens of the city. Public art is a way of putting a stake in the ground and saying, we are here, and looking out at the horizon and saying, your life counts, you matter. I feel extremely honored that we get to work with hundreds of artists every year who are continually on a mission to make our world a better place. I look forward to this discussion. I look forward to 30 more years, I won't be around, of mural art, providing a platform where artists can grow, flourish, create. Thank you. Oh, I also want to thank Damon Bain. Where's Damon Bain? Damon Bain! Damon Bain helped create the beautiful, Damon, stand up. The painting that is Teddy. He took Teddy's image and just made it beautiful. And Damon, your murals grace the sides of buildings everywhere, and we thank you. Oh, I'm so glad I remembered. Damon Bain. Anyway, now I want to introduce our moderator for the evening. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Moriuchi, who is the Assistant Professor of Art History at LaSalle University, who will introduce the artists. And I'm just really excited. This is going to be a wonderful conversation. And thank you again for coming.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see so many faces in the audience. Thank you for joining us. So I first want to thank PAFA and Mural Arts for supporting tonight's event. I'm grateful to Lori Wasselchuk for inviting me to moderate the panel and to Theodore Harris for recommending me for this role. So I am honored to be among such thoughtful, thought-provoking, and creative artists that are at the forefront of the public art and activist landscape. My interest, I'll just say a few brief remarks before I introduce the panelists. So my interest in the topic of public art, murals, activist art stem from two principal areas. First, the classroom. I've been teaching courses in public art, monuments, murals, street art, and contemporary art and activism for over the past 5 years. And it is important to me to discuss with students the power of art to communicate new perspectives, to resist, to subvert, to draw awareness to social and political concerns, and to elicit action. The other place from which I approach this topic is from my own research and study. I am a Latin Americanist by training and focus on Mexican art. The Mexican modernists were avid proponents for public art, namely murals and prints, because of their presence in the public sphere and their accessibility to wider audiences of all social classes. Through their public art, the Mexican muralists and printmakers criticized entrenched conservative values in bourgeois institutions, challenged dominant historical narratives and provided counter-narratives, and championed revolutionary leaders. They ardently believed in art as an instrument for social and political change. More recently, over the past 3 years, amidst the global pandemic and civic unrest, I co-edited a volume titled Art and Activism in the 21st Century, published by Routledge in December of 2022. I learned a tremendous amount about what is at the pulse of the field of art and activism today from the 23 essays that comprise the volume written by scholars, curators, and artists from around the world. I am blessed to call the amazing city of Philadelphia, the mural capital of the world, my home. It is a city that has been an advocate and supporter of public art for decades. There are many interesting interchanges among tonight's panelists' work. Among these, the lifting of Black history, culture, and voices, the foregrounding of counter-narratives that challenge systemic and institutional racism, and the emphasis on the intersections between power, racism, and capitalism. Each artist will give a brief presentation of their work. Following all three presentations, I will guide a conversation among the panelists drawing on some of these themes as well as others, and at the end we will open up the floor to include questions from all of you. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Theodore A. Harris. So Theodore A. Harris is a Philadelphia-based visual artist and poet. His work has been exhibited nationally and internationally and is in private and public collections, such as University of New Mexico Art Museum, the St. Louis University Museum of Art, LaSalle University Art Museum, Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, McGill University, University of Pennsylvania, and so on, and many more. Harris is the co-founder of the Anti-Graffiti Network, now the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program. Harris has also co-authored and authored books, including Our Flesh of Flames, Malcolm X's Ideology with Amiri Baraka, Triptych with Amiri Baraka and Jack Hirschman, I Ran From It and Was Still In It with Fred Moten, and Thesenter, Conscientious Objector to Formalism. He is the founding artistic director of the Institute for Advanced Study in Black Aesthetics. His recent exhibition, Theodore A. Harris, Art as Social Praxis, dedicated to art historian David Craven, was mounted at Linfield University in 2021. As a 2022 Visual Artist Fellow for the Center for Emerging Visual Artists, he is developing an installation project for the Curtis Institute of Music, titled Thesenter, the Thinker, Nina Simone and the Politics of Music. Please join me in welcoming Theodore A. Harris.
Hello, everybody. Good to see some old friends and new friends, I hope. Thank you, PAFA. Thank you, AMP. Thank you, Judith Tannenbaum, one of the curators of Rising Sun, for including my work in this exhibition. Jane, we go back like babies with pacifiers. It means a lot to see you here. Thank you, Kathy Harris, Damon, who just took my work and messed it up. But thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you. Who else? Lamont Steptoe, who you all may know, if not personally, the great poet and activist. So I don't have a lot of time, but I'm gonna get to it, okay? So my paper is titled Vetoed Dreams 1995, Before and After the Insurrection. Do I go up? Yeah. When Lori and I were talking, and I was talking about putting the word insurrection in the title, was because I think there would be no PAFA had the Capitol been overturned, had the election been overturned. You all would be woke. You woke anyway. But that's a good thing, because, you don't want to be in a coma. You'd rather be woke. And, this would be a straight up dictatorship. So, you see I'm about to go on and on about that. This is an excerpt from the book Jane mentioned that I co-authored with Baraka, titled Our Flesh of Flames, and the manifesto that is in that book is titled Collaging the Capitol. And at the beginning of the manifesto is a quote by Randall Robinson, who was spearheaded and had a lot of influence on the anti-apartheid movement. And this is a quote from his book, The Debt What America Owes to Blacks. He's talking about the Capitol building. This was the House of Liberty, and it had been built by slaves. Their backs had ached under its massive stones. Their lungs had clogged with its mortar dust. Their bodies had wilted under its heavy load bearing timbers. They had been paid only in the coin of pain. Slavery lay across American history like a monstrous cleaving sword. But the capital of the United States steadfastly refused to divulge its complicity or even slavery's very occurrence. This is an excerpt from a manifesto that I wrote that was in an interview that I gave with Jonathan Eburn for the ASAP Journal. So, Jonathan, he was preparing to interview me and sent me some questions and stuff, and then when we were actually going to talk to each other on the phone was the day after the Capitol was breached. So this is in the beginning of that interview. I wrote this piece. Peering out from the broken windows theory for broken hearts, we witnessed whiteness weaponized, invading the U.S. Capitol building like dangerous little tykes, breaching a bouncy house. Aggressive paper boys and girls hustling fake news. Those anti-intellectual formalist hawks gouged out the eyes of Blue Lives Matter lobbyists as they hopscotched in the chalk outlines of our vaccinated blood, yelling, lying lungs, barking, "I can't breathe." They had the nerve to say they couldn't breathe. Astonishing. From their maskless gargoyle faces, and the more they bounced, the more hot air and blood spilled from the inflation tube of deflated consciousness. This is the cover, the second book that the collage Vetoed Dreams appeared on. This book is by Tony Medina. He's a professor at Howard University, and I got to know Tony through Lamont, and that's one of several books that has been published on the cover of. This collage is from 2002. As a matter of fact, I showed this piece because I think a few days or a month or so after it was Dr. King's birthday after they breached the Capitol. Just to show some irony there. This piece, Postcard from Conquest, is literally started with a postcard. The front of the postcard is in the center lower panel there of Columbus landing in America. The back of the postcard is up top with the Capitol building there, right side up. This painting, as you may know, and then the Capitol is in the corner up there, inverted. But this painting is in the Capitol Rotunda, where those paintings, are there to create a myth about how this country was started. For people to visit so they can be lied to. Lastly, this is a new version of Vetoed Dreams that I found this still from a movie of these flying saucers attacking America, attacking the Washington Monument, attacking all these symbols, monuments, and so I used this one here. In the spirit of Martin Luther's Reformation, Today, formalism is the communion wafer, and the Castle Church now is the mega museum, where the MAGA hat is a passed around, bottomless collection plate with millions of dollars spilling from behind the broken walls of Joel Osteen's church. The video I wanted to show you is here. I may need some help. Is it? thank you. Oh, that shows you how hip I am. Okay. Thank you. This is, just want to show you a few minutes of this video of Amiri Baraka reading the captions he wrote to my collages before our book was published. We gave a presentation at Haverford College. It's just a few minutes. This is
The first one. 1999, remember Eric Smith? DIS, D-I-S. That's interesting, isn't it? How the young people say dis, which is an old biblical word meaning the capital of hell. The worst dis, of course, is to make you disappear. So dis is the capital of hell. H. Box Brown was how I found out this mammy jamma was upside down. Like H. Rap, later, Box had to split from the subjugator and they slavery shit. God called Box and Allah called Rap. Told both of them to get their hat. Y'all can't be around this slave master rat. Hate good, love evil, think they God when they the devil. That's why everything turned around. They got the whole world upside down. Free Mumia. And now, of course, free Rap Brown. Proud of our blood, it say here, but this one I say a collaged eulogy for James Byrd. You know who that was, the one that Bush tied to the back of a truck and dragged through the street till his body fell apart. You know, this is the period of a counterfeit president for this fake democracy. And coming out here in America, because this show is America, me and my man was coming to America say, if we get out of here, they won't even ask for no credentials. They'll see us and know we ain't Americans. This is why it's so hard for y'all to understand that people all over the world hate America. Because you live in little comfortable toilet bowls like this. 1998, a collage eulogy for James Byrd Jr. Inside out. Flag is their north. Death is its sport. You wear, ain't you? If he don't inhale, he don't come. You should own blood. If you are God of one of his children, if you can ask him inside the crack house of the church. Proud of your murders by the dungeon of devils, hid behind the flag. Can you hear the slurping? He don't inhale, he don't come. Can you hear the slurping like birds chirping after the harmonica blows? And bombs are dropped on foreign niggers, dark niggers, death mailing hate. 666. Officer Volpe.
Sorry about that.
You see, they just let the sucker out. They just let one of these people back out. They just overturned the decision in this fast moving, as Toni Morrison says, the Nazification of
I was
America.
going to end it there, actually.
The hacking of Officer Volpe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Theodore. So I'm now going to introduce our next artist. Ms. Icar is an anonymous art collective comprised primarily of Black women. Their name is Racism Backward. They were established in 2018. Their members comprise of an illustrator, photographer, designer, prop stylist, street artist, and collage artist. They started this collective to create works that celebrate women, global Blackness, and play. They create narratives in the form of mixed media street art and fine art that explore histories and imagine the best case scenario future from the perspective of women and people of color. Their work has been exhibited at Pyramid Hill Museum in Ohio, Culture House, DC, Wellincora Gallery, the Leroy Neiman Gallery, Westwood Gallery, I-20 Gallery, WNYC Radio's Green Space, and the Manifest Hope Art for Obama Democratic Convention Gallery exhibition. They have done site-specific installation work at Etsy's HQ, Publicis, and branded art projects for Miss Lauryn Hill's World Tour, Essence Magazine, and Nickelodeon. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Icar.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ms., and I represent the Ms. Icar Collective. I'm honored to share my story, thoughts, and work with you today. I will be using the terms we and I interchangeably as I work with the team, and we acknowledges and honors them, the team, and also the shoulders of all that came before us. We recognize that gender and race are constructs, and our identifications reflect this particular time, place, and context. But we mention both being women and Black as primarily to contextualize the point of view of the work. In many ways, the Ms. Icar Collective is an experiment on cooperative making, mindful creative practices, and taking up space with an interest in alternative exchange. Most of us met in the early days of the internet. So it was during the transition from film to digital photography, and we shared an interest in creating work that represented us and also bridges real life experience with digital, as we saw that over time we were watching this transition to a real life experience, and the way that people were connecting, watching them get sucked all the way into screens and trying to play with how do you balance these forms of connectivity and study how people are interacting. Our work explores play, beauty, and radical liberation. We create narratives in the forms of mixed media art and fine art. They explore histories and imagine the best case scenario futures. Our work is informed by collective experiences, our fascination with color, texture, and proportions. And the term proportions is used widely, proportions of power, proportions in physical space as well. Our work are explorative elements, arrangements, resulting in murals, photographs, illustrations, moving images, installation work, and more recently, AR works. So since we spent a lot of time developing our visual language, I figure it's better for us to show you. Let's see. First up is Of Expansion. Of Expansion is a collection of about 50 pieces of artwork. It includes an installation of televisions, banners, as well as collage pieces. Now, Of Expansion was all created during 2020. And if you guys remember, we weren't really going too many places in 2020. And so we were thinking of clever ways in which to exhibit and showcase this work, and decided to make a very trippy film called Of Expansion.
What you think this one mean? Like, what's it giving you?
I don't know.
What's
I
it
bet
giving?
you the artists don't even know what it means. They just be making stuff up. So we used the city of Philadelphia as our backdrop and pretty much reenacted a studio visit, and it touched on all of the topics of the work. It was very fun. We used our no-eyed blue puppets to guide viewers through this work, and it's shown at a couple of film festivals, and it has a little bit of a cult following, and it's definitely available as an NFT if you'd like to check it out.
Get your life, lose your weed, get your life.
We've had the honor and privilege of creating murals from Germany to Houston to Oklahoma to Cincinnati, New York, and Philadelphia. But one of the murals that stands out for us is the Perspectives mural that was commissioned by Artworks in Cincinnati. One of the most amazing things about this project is that we had the opportunity to meet with members of the community, as well as visit the archives and explore the history and get to know the thriving community of Walnut Hills in Cincinnati. For this mural, we decided to let the interviews of the people inform this piece. We created a mini documentary that asked people to describe their best case scenario for Walnut Hills. We compiled these stories and translated them into a mural that showcases photographs of people that we shot in the neighborhood as well as images from the archives. We also had the opportunity to work with a group of youth over the summer to create the work, and we installed it. In keeping with merging real life and digital life, this mural is augmented and features a quote from the documentary as well.
How can life be like as cool as possible for as many people as possible? Can we just exist and accept that there is enough room?
Last year, we did a fiber-based series of work called the Bank Series, and it featured grills. So many of our cultural contributions to society are often ostracized and put down when we take ownership of our own aesthetics. Autonomy is a really, really heavy and big deal for our collective. We think about it a lot, and we think about it in the work that we create. Grills are an excellent example of us taking ownership of our own aesthetics. They speak to a particular value structure and bucking of respectability politics. The history of America is not kind when it comes to banks and financial institutions in relationship to Black people. This can be seen in numerous examples, redlining, Tulsa, etc. But many aesthetic values are created out of people being ostracized from mainstream society, including gold teeth, grills, fronts. But they're also examples of expression and practices of aesthetics that have been incredibly preserved. This is the part that we often focus on. We are very mindful not to be responsive to discriminatory practices. To put it quite simply, haters are going to hate. Colonial practices are alive and well, and we're not interested in fixing broken people. We are interested in growth in ourselves and our community. While making these, we thought a lot about George Washington, well, particularly his teeth. This man had the teeth of enslaved people in his mouth. And how interesting it is that a person can be so revered in that particular way, even though they had the teeth of another person involuntarily in their face, and how respectability politics have created an environment in which gold teeth are not considered appropriate in a lot of places, but they represent values that are created autonomously. So this series was a celebration of gold teeth, fronts, and people taking up space and taking ownership of their aesthetics in the way that they would like to be seen and expressed. We teamed up with Kendra Steph Davis to create a 20-foot-high inflatable photography sculpture of two hands with long interchangeable nails. This piece is called The Full Set. The Full Set is a playful origin story that plays with the complex intersectionality of American culture. This piece creates a reason to gather, connect, and celebrate Blackness. Now, the Full Set has interchangeable nails, and who doesn't love a good remix? For last year's Blink Festival, we created electric light-up nails entitled Their Flowers Edition. For Their Flowers Edition, we have channeled the theme of giving them their flowers for these illuminated nails. This expression is used to describe giving someone their proper respects while they are around to receive them. This piece is an ode to all the cultural contributors that are often underrepresented, particularly in Black grooming culture. So we stay pretty busy. That's what we do. We have a few upcoming Philadelphia-based projects that we're currently working on. We have an immersive textile collage-based installation entitled Something You Can Feel that is opening in May at Otherworld. We also have an augmented reality experience that's sponsored by Black Music City Grant, honoring the influence of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and it's entitled Heavy Distortion. And we have a project that we're working with Mural Arts on called the Ride Out Mural that is celebrating intersectionally Black ride culture, including bicycles, motorbikes, and horseback riding. And so those will all be coming pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Icar. Fascinating. Looking forward to seeing those Philly projects. Our last speaker, artist, poet, Lamont B. Steptoe. He was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and is a graduate of Temple University's School of Radio, Television, and Film. Steptoe is a Vietnam veteran, a poet, publisher, and founder of Whirlwind Press. He has written 16 collections of poetry and published 3 collections by South African poet Dennis Brutus. In 2005, Steptoe was awarded an American Book Award for his collection, A Long Movie of Shadows, by the Before Columbus Foundation. In 2006, Steptoe was inducted into the International Hall of Fame for Writers of African Descent by the Gwendolyn Book Center in Chicago. Steptoe's work appears in over 100 anthologies, and he has read his work throughout the United States and in Nicaragua, Holland, and France. Steptoe's forthcoming book, Woke, will be published by Whirlwind Press. Please join me in welcoming Lamont B. Steptoe.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, let me thank everyone who had anything to do with putting together this incredible program. Besides being a poet, I'm also a photographer. I started writing poetry when I was 10 years old, and I studied photography when I was 14, and I do both. You know, as you can see, I have the camera on. I would like to open up the program by reading a poem of this last book that I published of Dennis Brutus's, because it is very crucial now. As Sonia Sanchez would say, it is time to be brave. They are remembering June 16th, 1976, student uprising in Soweto. They are coming back through wood smoke weaving from fires and swirls of dust from erratic breezes. You will see ghosts are returning, ghosts of young men, young women, young boys, young girls, students. And if you look closely, you will see many of them have torn flesh, have wounds bright with fresh blood, and there is blood in the sands of Soweto. The ghosts are coming back, past barking police dogs, through shifting veils of smoke. Those who oppose oppression are coming back, demanding dignity, challenging injustice. They return to join a new generation. They chant, resume the fight, resume the fight, resume the fight. One thing, if you know anything about poets, is that, as a late poet Etheridge Knight used to say, if you're not stirring up trouble, you're not doing your job. And a poet has to be fascinated with truth and beauty. This is one of my latest collections. It has to do with Philadelphia's Congo Square. Does anybody know where Philadelphia's Congo Square is?
That's at 6th and Chestnut, right?
7th and Chestnut. It's called Washington Square. But I went to that square and sat in that square 4 to 5 days a week for 5 years. It's a haunted space. They bring the ghost tour through there every night. But what I found was they weren't speaking enough, and there's some Revolutionary War soldiers buried in there, but they weren't speaking enough about the enslaved black Africans or the free people of color that were allowed to be themselves on Sundays. This is the first poem, Congo Square. I dance with the ghost of Congo Square, meet and marry what isn't there. Oh, the full moon in Congo Square, shining on what isn't there. The laughter and the tongues from far away that echo in the present day. Oh, the joy and the freedom in Congo Square of the women and children who are not there. The cakewalk and bambola is all the rage, how they mimic and mock their master's talk. Guinea and Congolese can do as they please in Congo Square. Rhythms can live for a day before going underground to be put away. Tongues are loosened with some rum, but always there is no drum in Congo Square. They come in rags and they come in tails to share their woe and their wails. They shimmy and they shake and they jump around, make the dirt under their feet holy ground. I dance with the ghosts of Congo Square, meet and marry what isn't there. So powerful is their glee, so powerful is their pain, it reaches across centuries for descendants to claim. Oh, the full moon in Congo Square, shining on what isn't there, echoes in the present day of what was there and gone away. Holy ground and sacred bones, history and dust, cosmic phones. I dance with the ghost of Congo Square, meet and marry what isn't there. The last poem in this book, because sitting there all that time, I was instructed by invisible entities to say certain things. And these are some of the untold stories. My life slipped away on a razor's edge. My life ended when a bullet tore through my heart. I was strangled into everlasting silence by a jealous lover. A runaway horse and carriage caught me unawares because I was too old, too deaf, and too blind to recognize the danger. I was burned up in a mysterious fire in a rooming house down by the docks. I froze to death in an alleyway and lay buried by deep snow for 3 weeks. I was killed by a mob of drunken whites who stomped me to death with the song of "Die, nigga, die," ringing in my ears. I dropped dead on my way to church and had forgotten my pocketbook at home. We's all here in this ground with our untold stories, whispering them to the wind on nights of the full moon. Maybe they's loud enough to enter history's ears. I wanted to say something about my birth in Pittsburgh. My mother used to say, God rest her soul, she used to say, son, we come from people that shoot first and ask questions later. But I was born in the 7th month of pregnancy. They did not expect me to live. So I had to spend the first 8 weeks of my life literally in a glass coffin. Incubators weren't like they have now, you know, where you can reach in with gloves and handle the baby. And I think that probably contributed to me being a witness. James Baldwin talked a lot about the importance of being a witness. And so it made sense to me that after that experience, that I would pick up a camera at age 14 and begin to document what I was witnessing. And also going off to war. It was Martin Luther King's assassination on April 4th, 1968. I was a student at Temple University. I was working on a term paper comparing and contrasting the life of Gandhi and King. I come out of the library at 8:30, someone walks up to me and says, did you hear what happened? I said, what? I've been in the library all day. They said they killed Martin Luther King. I went back to my off-campus apartment at Broad and Dolphin, stayed up all night weeping, listening to black radio station eulogize King, and all hell was breaking loose in the streets. The next day I went to the Army recruit. The next day all the black students walked out of all the high schools and marched to Independence Hall, and I joined them. And I watched white parents come and pick up their kids and take them back to the suburbs. The day after that I went to the Army recruiter and I said, how fast can you get me out of here if I volunteer for Vietnam? He said, 3 weeks. I said, where do I sign? So I signed and left the country to go to war. There's a military tradition in my family. My mother's youngest brother, my Uncle Eugene, was in the invasion of Normandy. My late older brother did 2 years in Vietnam as a platoon sergeant, 23 and a half years in the military, and then I went and did 16 months in Vietnam. My mother used to say, you can't be much of a man if Uncle Sam don't want you. So I had to go prove I was a tough guy too. But I came back empowered by everything that I witnessed. And there's certain things that I suffer physically as a result of that experience. 3 cancer surgeries for being exposed to Agent Orange, 2 for bladder cancer, and the last one, they took my prostate out. And I just turned 74 years old. And I've written 3 books about my experiences in the war. What sustains me is being able to witness my time and to always be cognizant of the truth. The first continental African I ever met when I was in college, he was 30 years old. Me and the other roommate were 18. And he looks at me one day and he says, he was Zulu. And he looks at me one day and says, "Lamont, you're a troublemaker." And he gave me the name Maklufa, which means troublemaker. So that's what I do, you know. And there was an Irish poet that was here in Philadelphia for a long time named Pat Hinchy. And he had a line in one of his poems where he says, "It's the turbulence that keeps the waters clean." And so that, in this specific time where, you know, you have all those people that want to attack the U.S. Capitol and, you know, take us backwards instead of forwards, this is a time to be brave. This is a time to make art, you know, to make sure poets survive, to make sure artists survive, you know, to make sure that the younger children minds are not contorted or warped by misinformation. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was the first black man to receive a PhD from Harvard University, he wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. Many of us think because we have these degrees that somehow we escaped a miseducation. You need to check yourself on that. So my daughter, when she was 12 years old, she was in 6th grade, they brought a teacher over from England who was teaching a class. And my daughter raised her hand and she said, "I don't believe a word you say." I wish I had had that insight when I was that age to tell teachers, "I don't believe a word you say." I worked for ABC News, Action News. I was management. And they told me to, I left after 2 years because they told me to shut up too many times. And my mother used to say, "Son, don't kiss nobody's ass for a paycheck." And I haven't ever done it and never will. My work is out there. I've been mentored by a lot of people. The poet Samuel Allen, who passed away at the age of 97. He was a Harvard-educated lawyer. He was part of the black expatriate community in Paris in the 50s and 60s. When he got out of World War II, him and Romare Bearden went to Paris. There was a reunion of them in 1992, and I went over for that reunion. And Jimmy Baldwin. I started reading Baldwin when I was 14. And the night that I met him, that image that you see, 30 seconds before I took that shot, and then I said to him, "Mr. Baldwin, I have waited my whole life for this moment." Jimmy Baldwin was an honest-to-God prophet. And the late poet Etheridge Knight. He died at age 59 from lung cancer, but Etheridge lied about his age and found himself in the Korean War as a medic. And he was so traumatized by what he saw, he began to use morphine on himself. And to support his habit, when he got out, he turned to heroin. And to support his heroin habit, he turned to armed robbery. And so he did 8 years in an Indiana state prison where he was discovered by the late poet Gwendolyn Brooks. So those were some of the people. And then, of course, South African poet Dennis Brutus, who served time in Robben Island with Nelson Mandela, breaking stones. Dennis was my mentor for 22 years. Sam was my mentor for 30 years. And growing up without a father, I only met my biological father once for 5 minutes in Pittsburgh. My mother and I were leaving Carnegie Library, and this man walks up and asks my mother, "What's he like?" and I was 4 years old. And she said, just like you, stubborn. And he seemed to like that. It's good to be stubborn on some issues, you know. But as an Aquarius, February 9th, same day as Alice Walker, Langston Hughes was February 1st. We have incredible memories. You know, we have incredible memories. We can remember things that most people forget. And so that is I'm the last member of my nuclear family since I lost my younger brother. And my duty now is to go back and put all of that in poetry and narrative poetry as well as prose and creative nonfiction. That's my job as a writer. You know, I went to, this last story, I went to Sudan. I was working with a professor from Howard University, Dr. Tojo Fuso, and he was doing a book on contemporary African art, and he needed a photographer. So I came along. We started out in London, and my job was to photograph the artists and the artwork. We arrived in Sudan, and this was my first experience with a theocracy. And there's this huge market where the white Nile and the blue Nile come together, and Khartoum, Omdurman. And when you land in the airport, there's a big sign that says, photography is illegal. So here I am strapped down with my 2 Nikons. Foreigners, tourists have gone to this place where they have sides of camel beef, cattle, and everything, covered with black with flies. They just shoo the flies away, cut off the meat you want, boom. So what had happened was, so many tourists were doing this, that when they saw somebody taking pictures, people would just walk up and start stabbing them to death. So this Nubian soldier, Dinka, very tall, blacker than me, he walks over and he says, were you taking pictures? No. He said, your cameras look ready. I said, no, I haven't taken any pictures. I had taken a bunch of pictures. He said, let me tell you something. If I see you taking a photograph, I'm taking you straight to prison. I said, okay, I won't take any photographs, you know. But that's where, and I was telling Teddy and Aaron earlier, when I was a student at Temple, and I had a 16mm film camera, 2 black men stabbed each other to death right at Broad in Susquehanna. So I'm on the street filming it. A crowd gathers around. And as the cops are picking up the 2 dead bodies and putting them in the van, this crowd forces me into a doorway and they said, what are you doing with that camera? I said, I'm documenting what just happened. They said, we're going to take that camera. I said, over my dead body. They said, well, that can be arranged. It took 2 cops from the homicide scene to come over and extricate me. And I've been chased in South Philly in the Italian market. I was photographing this black man cleaning fish, and I take his picture. He looks up, and he said, I'll teach you to take somebody's picture without asking them. And he chases me down the block with this huge knife. But that's how dedicated I am, you know, to my art. Okay, thank you.
I have some questions that I'm going to use to guide our conversation, but it's meant to be a dialogue, so please feel free to open up new avenues, new directions for conversation. The first one is about artistic choices. There are affinities between some of your artistic choices and mediums, mainly photography. You all use photography, collage in a couple cases, mural making, text and image. And I'm wondering if you could share some thoughts about how you choose your artistic medium, and how that choice, whether it's poetry or collage or photography or combinations thereof, how you see them serving as a form of dissent or activism.
Well, I'm always attracted to, I can't tell you how many demonstrations I've marched in here since I've been in this city, and I've been in this city for 50 years. You're going to be losing me soon, but that's another story. But very important to document, what is actually happening, because you'll see the distortion in the media. They will not, a lot of times they overlook certain things, you know, and you have to, you know, have a certain amount of courage. That's why I left ABC News, because they told me to shut up too many times. I was on point, and they said, shut up. And, you know, like I said, my mother said, son, don't kiss nobody's ass for a paycheck. So I walked away.
We decide on the mediums a lot based on how we want to communicate. Like, we're really aware there's always distortions, even with documentation, and there's been so many years. Like, we're in this beautiful time when we can look back at how we've documented things, who's been excluded, who's been telling the story, what perspective it comes from, and what perspectives are valued. And that's an interesting time to be in. We haven't really looked at our media that way. In the past, so many things have been like, this is the history, like similar to, as you mentioned, where it's like you need a voice in what's going on because it's representing an underserved perspective. And so we actually play with the distortion of that documentation. So a lot of the times we shoot a lot. There's so much archival work that gets put into our work, but the medium, it has to do with how we want to tell the story, who's it speaking to, and in a lot of ways doing the public artwork with murals, it's a very now way of communicating with people on the street, like where it's like, people are out and about, and it's a great way to have that conversation, but I think that over time that has shifted and changed and more. But it's always the story that always determines what the medium is going to do.
And it's very important
Lamont, hold on. I want to get this thought out before I forget. I think I found my voice in collage, and some really weird things happened in the early days of mural arts. There was Bud Dwyer. Does anybody remember Bud Dwyer?
Yeah, he shot himself in the mouth at a news conference.
Right.
Harrisburg.
Yeah, and then there was the Challenger exploding, right? And I took those images and started making collages. And what I learned from that was you could talk about the past and the present at the same time and create a third, fourth, fifth meaning with that. And you teach yourself by making the work, you create your own aesthetic, right? And you learn how to tell a story in multiple ways. It can go so many ways because of the time in which some of the photographs could be recent history or very pushed in the past. So you could tell a story, the past and present at the same time, and complicate questions with that. So if I'm touching on your question, that's what comes to mind first. Lamont, you take it away.
Well, it's very important, I think, to be courageous, especially in poetry. Many are called, but few are chosen. Many are called, but few are chosen. And the chosen ones are examples of people that endure through the years. Take their artwork and endure, and create a new way of looking at the world. It was very important for me, I know that I survived Vietnam because of my mother's prayers. I know that for a fact. I was supposed to be dead many times. So I have this whole spiritual perspective that I bring to it. My 5th grade teacher called me a brilliant student of history. And I've taken that to the max in terms of reading everything I can about history from all people, and then having Cherokee ancestry. I've been going back and things have been revealed to me. I could tell you one thing that was revealed to me. It happened right here in Philadelphia. This was a dream. The entire city was blacked out. And I'm in front of Independence Hall. And everybody's weeping. And I'm pushing my way through the crowd and I'm saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? And finally somebody whirls around and holds up a Philadelphia Daily News and it says, Russian troops mass on U.S. border. And I woke up. You have to be, you know, when you get those kind of insights into the future, and I've also gone into the past. For example, I'm in Paris, and it's 1947. I was born in 1949. And I'm holding Richard Wright on the floor, and I'm saying, I'm not letting you up until you admit that I'm stronger than you. So finally he admits it, and I turn around, and French is being spoken around me, and I turn around and there's two life-size kachinas. Kachinas are sacred to the Navajo and to the Hopi. And one of them is whispering to the other and pointing to me. And I said, what year is this? And they said, it's 1947. I said, I'm going back to the future. And I went out through the ceiling. You know? So there's all these different things that you have to be willing to explore, you know, both spiritual and otherwise, to really leave a lasting mark, I feel.
You know, as you're talking, I was just thinking about the fact that Lamont, when I first started writing poetry, Jane was very supportive and gave me books. Tony, her husband. And I met Lamont, and he saw my interest and mentored me. And that's another thing that's very important. I mean, the way to figure this out, you know, whether you're a curator, an artist, visual artist, you know, musician, is to try to find your medium to tell the story, but, you know, try to think globally. You know, I think it's very important. And grab someone and let them teach you, because you don't know anything, you're figuring it out. And I mean, the exhibition that you mentioned of mine that was at Linfield University was dedicated to David Craven. Why? Because David Craven was an art historian whose books we used as reference in the murals. And I would not have known about him. Well, I learned about him early because we used his books as reference for the murals. And those books were sitting on the scaffoldings. You know, we tore those books up. And so on my own, I investigated who David Craven was and loved his work. And we became friends. And when his mentee, I don't know if this is still on the subject or not, but his mentee, Brian Winkenwetter, who teaches there, asked me to do the show there. And since that was his mentee, David was cool with me, I decided to dedicate the show to him and did a specific body of work as an extension of what I was already doing for him, about his scholarship, about the artists that he champions, the critics who he was in dialogue with. So, you know, in this, where we are living now, is anti-intellectual. And to call people who want to know who they are, that are interested in knowledge, woke, and try to turn that into something that is sick, and to try to take books out of libraries, we are living in such sickness. These people are sick, you know, and it's very sad.
And people are more willing to kill you now if you're a truth teller.
I mean,
Be brave.
That's huge. That's a huge part. I mean, that's a huge part of like our anonymity and like the audacity of the work is to, we realize you're always on the backs of everything. It's one of the things too that amongst a bunch of elements that I personally love about Black culture, the way that we honor things. So like we remix, whether we're intellectually breaking down things or having these reminders. So in music, we see it commonly where things get referenced over and over. We see them in visual art as well. Like we pay ode to a lot of things that exist. We pay ode to poets, scholars, terms that come up. So in our day-to-day, there's constantly this like prayer to what's existed before. And it's a beautiful way to encapsulate those things. So that, looking externally to the work that we create, yeah, the world's crazy. Like you look outside, you're like, what are you talking about? How could you be mad at someone? Like it's easy to open your doors and be upset or hear all kind of nonsense. And that comes up a lot, like in work that we do, even though a lot of it is joy and play based. That's not a space that Black people, that's not a space that women occupy heavily, like Black women, stereotypes, all of these things. So to audaciously just exist in that and to make that like a mantra, a mindful practice, because it's easy to walk down the street and just be like, what are you saying? Who wrote this? How do you have a job? What is going on here? And then being like, you know what? We are so adjusted to living in a microcosm in the United States as marginalized or hyphenated people that in some ways it almost becomes a superpower. Like where you're just like, we built your world and our world. And in a lot of ways, looking to almost in some cases the most oppressed for the answer is a really big deal. And anyone who's not doing that, that's a mess. Like if you're pulling the books out of the library, if you don't want to talk about trans rights, if you're not seeking like equity for everybody involved, that's just problematic. And a lot of times I wonder, and this could be youth speaking because everything is on the back of everything else, the idea of being heavily dismissive and understanding the privilege of that. Like understanding that's not something that someone older can do. To go, you know what, I'm not doing this. We don't want to do this mural, or we want to do it this way, or we have to honor this person. And this is the only way that we're going to do it, whether you like it or not, right? Because you've oppressed everybody before. You know, we're not getting that upset, but we are though. We're holding that space where it's just all the things that never or couldn't have existed besides this now time. And that part is an interesting space to be in, and we're not taking it lightly. Though it may seem we're putting a lot of beautiful, colorful things on the walls, we're very, very much so aware that this is a now time. This exists in this now time, and there's even walking through the exhibition, which we have to really take time to do. The exhibition felt like this should have been here. This should have been existed. Like, what an honor. So, like, even with the gratitude of it existing, it's also, and you're welcome. You know? It's like, and you're welcome. So.
It's also very important as an artist to keep a sense of humor. You know, when I told my mom, I said, Mom, I want to go to college. My mother only went to the 10th grade. My older brother only went to the 10th grade. My older sister only went to the 10th grade. So I was the first one to graduate from high school. But when I told my mom I wanted to go to college, she said, son, don't be no educated fool. I said, what do you mean by that, Mom? She said, you'll find out. Just don't be one. And I've known a lot of educated fools in my life.
So you're all storytellers using different artistic medium. And I'm wondering about how history is present in your work. And the archive, you mentioned going into the photographic archives for your murals. I know you also go into the archive. You work with history and memory. And I'm wondering if you could share some of your thoughts regarding that connection of how history is present, and then also how do you see your work moving in the future?
Well, I have dirt from Harriet Tubman's grave in my house. I have dirt from Walt Whitman's grave, tomb in Camden in my house. Dirt from my brother's grave, my mother's grave, because there's a connection, you know. It's like an auxiliary. It empowers me. I remember why I'm here. I remember what I have to do, you know. So history is incredibly important, incredibly important. But the most valuable history is, of course, meeting another human being. Teddy, you told me this story about you were in Jane Golden's car, driving down Market Street, and she said, that's Lamont Steptoe.
Yep.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, it's magical. It's magical.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
for the Perspectives mural, we had a chance. It was interesting. It was very coded. It was like, we're excited for you to do a mural in Walnut Hills. There's some things happening here. And we're like, oh, what kind of things, you know?
Yeah.
And basically, it was like a very thriving Black entrepreneurial community.
Okay.
And ironically, the city decided to run MLK through the border, like just demolishing so many lives and families, splitting the whole neighborhood, the whole thing, right? And this happened relatively late when we think of those things. So I think it was like in the 70s, like, so it was a long thriving community. And it was just interesting to talk to people, and so people remember, this was the store, this was the deli, this is it. But what still exists? Like Harriet Beecher Stowe House, of course. Like, you know, yeah, so you have the savior narrative on there, you know, and we had a chance to visit the archives and go through the survey pictures that were taken. And there's notes on the pictures that say, there's nothing here. Like, you see the notes of people going through. So you see a guy with a sign with what the street name is. And then there's people in the background, grocery shopping, grandparents, grandchildren, sitting on stoop. There's all this life, right? Like he's the oddity, even in these photos that are put together for this particular telling that there's nothing there. It was so much energy, and that's one of those pieces it's in the mural. Like, there's these kids on the stoop, like, kind of chilling, and that's there. It was like to bring a lot of those things out, because there's so much. A lot of the times people can't read our stories. They don't see us. They don't see us at all, like, as wide, complex people, and it's a story that happens over and over and over, like the world is on repeat, you know, where it just keeps looping. And we felt that by honoring the future, like having having the artist who is there, the Bootsy glasses, which is Bootsy Collins is coming out, and this Afrofuturism, but also putting right in there, slipping in that piece that there wasn't nothing there. There's never nothing there. That's the same excuse that was used for America. There's nothing here, right? And like, minus the indigenous people, all of the communities. And so using the archives, like using archival footage, even our own personal archives, people that we honor as well too, has been such a great way to find where we're like looping and see where that's happening, and seeing if we can throw disruption in the loop, like over and over, because these narratives, they just keep going. So that's how we use it.
I remember seeing that photograph on your website, I think. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I was like, nothing here. You got all these people behind you? And, but people will justify, you know, to do what they want to do, they will justify it. You know, so it's really sad. But you said, you talked about the archive, using the archives. I don't think I really thought about how valuable they were until, a bunch of us used to go to Mary Baraka's house, like, was it every first of the month?
Every Saturday night.
Every Saturday night. Once a month, right? Right. So then he stopped doing it. And he said he was doing that because he had to clear his basement out to organize his archive, which he was selling to Columbia University. And I think one time we went and it was being organized, and I went in his basement. I was like, oh my God, look at all of this history.
They gave him $1 million for that. But he also duplicated everything and gave the same archive to Howard for nothing.
Right, exactly. I'm glad you said that. So that made me think deeply about what I have and who will get it and how will it be used, especially your children, your relatives, you know, not just an academic institution, but how are they able to access that stuff? So that, him doing that was a great move.
What's outrageous today is children are not being taught cursive in school anymore. I mean, I can't wrap my head around that. I'm teaching my 9-year-old and my 5-year-old grandchildren how to write cursive. It's just crazy.
I have a question for you though. Why is that important?
What, writing cursive?
Yeah, why? I want to hear your perspective on why is the preservation of that.
All of my poetry is written by hand in cursive, and then I type it. So that connection, of the scratching of the pen on the paper, whatever, it's very, very important. But it's a crime that children are not being taught cursive. That's outrageous. It's also a crime that most Americans only speak, as Barack would say, we don't speak English, we speak American. Learning other languages. I mean, I studied German, and I also studied Spanish. Well, I hung out with Puerto Ricans for 30 years, so a lot of my Spanish is Puerto Rican Spanish. But it's very important because there's certain circuits in your mind that if you don't open those up, you lose them forever. And I'd like to read a poem. This is my late mother. I took this photograph of her before she passed. And this is a poem that deals with the importance of struggle in the streets. Come on. And this cover was done by, speaking of history, by a man that used to work at ABC News with me. His name was Noel Miles, and he's a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass. For our journey in this American land, some of us deserve crowns of royal gold. For our marching, for our sign waving, for our shouting and chants, for our brick throwing, Molotov cocktail hurling, for our blockades and barriers, some of us deserve crowns of gold. For the assassinations of our leaders, for the cripplings, for the woundings, for the beatdowns, some of us have earned glittering crowns, diamond-studded, for our journey in the world, for everything taken by force, for everything stolen, our names, our culture, our dreams, for it all. Some of us have earned halos for our resistance, for our endurance, for our faith, our fire, our desire for freedom. We have earned, are earning, are deserving of crowns and halos. Let us wear them into battle. Remember the fallen, the visionaries and warriors who return in the pure black of night, whisper constitutions in our ears and hearts. For the many thousands gone, who roil the sea with rage, look for dreamers in love with the page. Barack used to talk about from the west coast of Africa to the east coast of the United States, on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, is a railroad of human bones, of enslaved Africans who either jumped off the ship or were thrown off the ship when they were discovered that they were transporting slaves. So I didn't see an ocean until I was 12 years old. Pittsburgh is 300 miles away. We're in the mountains. Pittsburgh is 1,000 feet above sea level. So when my late sister and her husband took me to Atlantic City, they had to tell me to close my mouth. I'd never seen that much water in my life. So then 2 years later, I'm down there by myself, sitting on a beach, and some force comes out of the water and hits me in the chest hard enough to knock me flat on my back. And I was like, what the fuck was that? It took me years.
Kid, you said?
I was 14.
Okay.
It took me
years.
It took me years to understand what it was. It was the ancestors. They put something in my heart. It was them that did that to me.
Thank you. I'm getting the nod that it's time to open up the floor to the audience for questions. So, are there any questions? Yes.
It's more of a comment. I just want to agree with you on the cursive because I think of it from the point of view of not just able to learn how to write it, but how do you read old documents if you can't write?
Oh yeah.
Like how electricity goes out and you don't have a computer. And you need to look into some history that was written by hand. You can't read it if you don't know cursive.
It's beautiful. I mean, the of denying the need or not need for cursive. It's questioning what things we hold and what we let go of and why we do them, which is really, as we're in a time of kind of reckoning with the history and practices, what things and why. So for us, it's important to have a tactile practice because that's, but we know that, but then it's been interesting watching young people navigate tech, and it's more complicated to figure out what's needed and what's not, and so that constantly becomes a question of why. I like to ask across the board, and it's great to hear your insight and to hear your insight as to why, and to constantly encourage questioning of all of us with all of our practices that we hold on to.
Yes, please.
Mr. Harris, on your work, when you first created Vetoed Dreams, what made you create the impersonal anatomies?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked
So
that because
now, like, you would think it was now that you had created
Right. So I think I was in a doctor's office and I was looking through some magazines and I saw that image. And the young person was standing in the pile of bodies in Rwanda, which is why they had the makeshift mask on from the stench. So I took it home and started placing it on top of other things. And came across the Capitol building in my newspaper stuff. And I turned it upside down. I liked the way it looked juxtaposed to the boy's face, looking back. And it fell, and I wanted to have it a little off center so that it fell on the Capitol space, in the Capitol space, and on the red field. So I like that. Now, I didn't glue anything down yet. So that's the way I work. I make the composition first before I cement it, basically. But the red field had the hard edge. So when I found the Capitol building, it was reversed. It was right side up. So the red field was on the other side. So I turned it upside down, it's on the other side. And so the hard edge, I didn't like that. So I just ripped it enough because I wanted to create more contrast and push the space back. So it's a very minimal collage, and it's very small. If you see it in person, it's no bigger than this phone, basically. But then I did a larger one for a benefit for Faith Ringgold. It's about 11 by 17. But that one is the first one. And that, so around that time, this was before, we got our nationals out of Rwanda. And it took a long time before the press even talked about it. Look at the work of Alfredo Jarre. He's done some great work around the Rwandan conflict. So, yeah, thanks for that.
Yes, in the back.
Thank you for highlighting the importance of digging into the archives, calling out to those ancestors, and in the same spirit, one day all of your work is going to end up in an archive somewhere. So if you imagine those infinite Black children that will exist in the future, how would you want them to speak on your work? Maybe 3 words, unless you had a paragraph.
Just one word. Resist.
So when I was thinking about the exhibition, this is something I wanted to get off my mind, or something that was on my mind. The rising sun image, I thought about, because the question that Eric Pryor had raised with Mark Thomas Gibson, about whether he saw the sun rising or setting. And I was like, in that collage in Vetoed Dreams, the inverted capital could be the sun. It could be going down. And if you're George Floyd, the sun is setting. You're seeing, literally, American democracy closing. Your eyes are closing, you know. And but for Eric Chauvin, the sun is rising. For George Floyd, it's setting. So this is the polar opposites that we live in this country. And so this what makes this exhibition even greater is the question. And the work in the show at both institutions is stunning. And we have to take our time and really sit with the work. Some of it is more blatantly political, and some of it is more subtle. And so,
Native people
Yeah.
have a very, they've thought about the future of this country. And I would recommend that you find this book called, it's by the Hopi. The Hopi elders made this, had this vision in 1100 AD. And it was only allowed to be released in 1995 about the future of this country. And one of the things they said was, that country that dropped a gourd of ashes, that's how they referred to nuclear war, on another country, when we bombed Japan, will in turn have gourds of ashes dropping on it. And that's something we seriously need to think about. You know, especially with Putin and what's going on in Ukraine, we could get hit with a nuclear weapon tomorrow, you know. So it brings everything into focus, you know, your spirituality, your concern for your children and grandchildren, you know, it's all out there, you know. And it's very important to, you know, whoever you pray to, it's very important to pray right now. Very important.
Okay, we're good to one more.
One more.
One more.
One more. Go ahead.
Thank you all so much. This was really, really interesting. Ms., you made a comment about how the mural was kind of the public art of the now, and I think murals obviously have been around for a long time, but could you and the others speak a little bit to kind of what is the future of, what does public art look like in the future? Will it still be murals? Is it not murals? You know, what does art and activism in public space look like in the future?
I think we're in a time where, like, there's a lot of people feeling disconnect because of the amount of time that we spend on screens. So though there has been murals, there's murals from these multiple sides, right? So you have like the public art mural program, like Mural Arts, right? But then you also have all of this incredible street art that's been validated now. It's not that it didn't exist, it's validated.
I love Banksy.
Yeah, I do too. Like, there's disruptive work. There's so much work that it's questioning things such as like preservation, rotation, like all of these things where you have this idea of how archival is a mural versus a mural festival where the work goes up for a year, if that, and gets transferred, right? You have the process too, the 3 days versus the months and community input and all of those things. And it's interesting because we're in a time where they all exist at the same time with like almost the same amount of eyes on it. But the difference with this time is that I think people are starved for human connection and real life experiences. So what we're seeing with our murals is we had kind of a small list that with folks going, where are you guys going to be at? What's going on? And we made a very small list of all of the murals and activations that we would be doing for the year. I don't think there was one place we went to that didn't have somebody travel from that list to the installation, which was interesting, right? Because it spoke to people looking for something to engage with. So they didn't want to just see it on their phone or on a time lapse. They wanted to actually do something in person. And I feel like with the ability to expand with like AR and move through those spaces could possibly create another opportunity for that. But I really do feel like the future right now is almost going back to the past. Like, I think if you set a picnic up outside, people would gather and come because they're just starved. It's similar to how we're connecting, what is missing, who you're praying to, how do we get together and joyously do things. So this is an example of that, this beautiful turnout to hear us share our thoughts. And I think that public art right now, with our overconsumption of media and maybe a starvation of connectivity, will probably move, my prediction is probably more to almost a performance base. But yeah.
One of the most powerful examples of the use of murals was when I went to Nicaragua during the Sandinista Revolution with Sonia Sanchez. And the words on the wall combined with images, etc., as they battled against the dictator Somoza, you know, who had 16 school children dropped into a volcano from a helicopter, and had a poet dropped into the same volcano from a helicopter. You began to see, you know, struggle in real terms, you know, how to take your environment and turn it against those forces of darkness and make it something full of light.
Thank you so much. This has been truly an honor to be in your presence and having these conversations with you. I really appreciate your time. And thank you to all of you for coming tonight.